Morning, guys. So I first want to start off by saying thank you for having us here, or thank you for having me here. Not a big public speaker, so bear with it, please. When we first, I say we, because when I was first approached by the program to do this lecture, it was under the pretense that I was going to be doing a tandem speaking with Dana Hoke. So Dana Hoke used to be the general manager of Turtle Bay Resort. And Dana and I had established a really good rapport and working relationship together. So I think Dana was actually asked first. And she's the one who pulled me into it. But circumstances have her not there anymore. And so I'm up here in front of you guys by myself. When I found out that I was going to be speaking on the original thought was, the dynamic and working relationship between Roy's Beach House and Turtle Bay Resort, because it's such an important dynamic to have a good rapport with your landlord, or with your basically they're our landlord. So that got scrapped, and I thought, well, what's the best?
We're going to bother you just for a minute.
Yeah.
We got to make sure we got your volume up.
Should I just speak more into?
Speaking.
So I thought, what's the best way to capture an audience or hold the audience attention? And I didn't want to talk about numbers, and I didn't want to talk about things that might be necessary to talk about in business, but I felt like there's a really interesting niche that I could provide that might be a little bit more specific to my role as a general manager at Roy's Beach House. And so I wanted to talk about the changing culture of Roy's Hawaii as an corporation. And the interesting dynamic that we're going through right now is that of a progression from a mom and pop type operation now transitioning into what's considered a large corporation with over 1,000 employees, and the importance of it, but also maybe some conflict and ramifications that come because of it. And I think it's a really specific thing that we're going through right now that I can speak to firsthand. So first, a little background on the company. Roy Yamaguchi, of course, is our founder. And if it was not for that gentleman as a person, as a human being, I wouldn't be with the company right now. He founded Roy's back in '88, graduated from Culinary Institute of America, New York. Don't quote me on this, I think it was in '76. Had some very huge success in some East Coast restaurants before he moved out to the West Coast. He opened up, I know you guys are too young for this, but he was featured. Anyone heard of Beverly Hills Cop? It was a big production movie back in the 80s, I think. And his restaurant was actually featured in that. It was with Eddie Murphy, and they did a scene where his restaurant played some kind of integral part in the crime. But it was a really big deal. He ran 385 North in California, and it was in Hollywood. All the A-listers would go there, and it was highly successful. But kind of like everything with Hollywood actors and types like that, it didn't last too long, right? So it was a couple years, and it kind of fizzled, and it dissolved, and he decided to pick up and move back home. So he's actually born in Tokyo, Japan, born and raised, but he has ties to Hawaii because his grandfather used to run a restaurant, I believe it was on Maui. And so he would go constantly back and forth from Hawaii to Japan. And when he went to the Culinary Institute of America, that's traditional French cooking methods, very more of that traditional cooking style. But he relied on his childhood growing up in Tokyo, growing up in Japan. So he that's his claim to fame, this fusion, right? That's where nowadays it's commonplace. I feel like you can go to a lot of restaurants and it's common to see this fusion aspect come in. Back then, when you're talking 30 years ago, we're celebrating our 30th anniversary this year. So 30 years ago, it was very rare to see blackened ahi, right? And raw fish and these types of fusion cuisine. It was unheard of. And he's credited with putting fusion cuisine on the map. Fast forward to today, well, so let's not fast forward. '88, he opened up Roy's Hawaii Kai. And yeah, pretty much fast forward to today, he has 10 holdings in Hawaii, a multitude of restaurants abroad. And when I was given the opportunity to come out here, I actually turned it down the first time. I said, I'm not really interested in moving all the way out to Kahuku because I'm a town boy, I'm a Waikiki, bred. So I said, I'm not really interested. And then I saw the restaurant. And if you haven't seen the restaurant, you guys should come check it out. It's a beautiful spot right on the beach, open air, very natural looking. It's a really nice gem right on the grounds of Turtle Bay. But anyway, the reason I'm bringing all this up is the company has grown from a single restaurant, and then they added on Poipu in Kauai, then they added on Big Island, then they added on Ko'olina, and slowly the company's been growing. Within the last 3 years, probably more closer to 2.5 years, we've doubled the size of the company from 6 restaurants, soon to be 11. So that's a huge amount of growth in a 2-year span. So what we're dealing with as a result is a changing culture from these smaller run mom and pop operations to a more standardized, not incorporation, but really going corporate. So we're bringing on an HR team, we're bringing on a marketing team, and these are things that Roy's really never had before. So what I wanted to focus on today was why I've been with Roy's for so long and what makes Roy's such a great company to be a part of and what's changing now. So a little bit background about myself. I have been in the restaurant industry for a while. Prior to Roy's, I've come from other establishments like Morton's, like Ruth Chris. Probably the biggest influence I had prior to this was Neiman Marcus, Mariposa. But I think we all know the name Neiman Marcus. It's very corporate. It's very political. It's all about politics and all about who you know and how much money you spend. And I didn't really care for that. I didn't care for that dynamic. It wasn't about the human being. It wasn't about the person and what they represented. It was about how much money they spent in the store and how big their wallet was. And so it really was this cold political scene. And so I left that and I come to Roy's, and it's the complete opposite. It was such a breath of fresh air. It was not about how much money you're worth, what's your net worth. It's about what kind of person are you, and respect gains respect. And it's about doing the right thing because it's the right thing, not because this person is worth so much money. And that was really, really a breath of fresh air for me. So that's the underlying factor here. I'm still with Roy because of that. I shouldn't be saying this, but he taught me to do the right thing and then ask for forgiveness. Don't ask for permission because you might get shut down. But if you know it's the right thing, taking care of your employees, taking care of your vendors, taking care of the guests that come in every day, do the right thing for them and then deal with the ramifications later. And that's why, honestly, I'm still with that company today, because Roy taught me that it's the person, not the bank account. Back in the day when it was, Roy's was hugely successful, and he gained such notoriety at one time that he struggled to keep up with the growth. So what happened, in a nutshell, instead of having one company dictating the standards, he surrounded himself by very strong GMs and chefs that knew his vision, that carried on his vision. But basically, they kind of had separate entities going on. There were all these mom and pop stores, Waikiki, Hawaii Kai, Ko'olina, that were run on the face of it. If you're a guest walking in, you probably couldn't tell the difference. Execution's the same, food's the same, and the experience from a guest point of view would probably, I would argue, be the same. Behind the scenes, it was a little different. You had different policies, different rules, different expectations, because the general manager and the executive chef had different expectations, right? One of the valuable things I think in that dynamic is that we had a lot more ability and leeway to fudge the numbers a little bit. So for a really good example is do the right thing, take care of your employees. If I had somebody who was out, say they got hurt on the job or they got hurt off the job and they didn't have the proper coverage, we would have the ability as general managers to say, hey, look, you know what, Susie's a really good employee for me. I want to take care of her and make sure that her family's taken care of. I'm going to pay for her insurance and make the company pay for that, even though she didn't qualify, right? Little things like this we were able to do because it was the right thing to do for the employee, and it was up to the general manager. Now it's a little bit different because it's more structured, it's more corporate, so there's a loss of there's a loss of ability on that end, but what you gain in the company as a whole is structure. So Roy, as a person, and I think this is where people stop seeing it. Roy, I guess his personality is more of a chef, right? Everyone sees. How many of you guys have dined at a Roy's? That's a fair amount of people. I thank you, first of all. But I think the company brand speaks for itself. It's a well-branded company. It has a strong following, and I think that starts with Roy. But what really people see when they talk about Roy Yamaguchi, they talk about Roy the chef, right? The chef personality. He was on Top Chef. He was on, that's his claim to fame. What they don't see, I would argue, that Roy is a good chef. I would argue that Roy is a better businessman. And I would argue that Roy, behind the scenes, what attracts me to work for him is, most of all, a philanthropist. Like, he's really about giving back to people. And that's the culture that he brings into his company. And that's really what makes his company different from others that I've been a part of. I'm a little off track, so I'm going to try to get back on for you guys here. So when I first came into the company, like I said, it was a really big difference from what I was used to. He is 100% about the end result, not the end result isn't money for him. The end result is fostering relationships, making friendships, and it's not just a one-time thing. It's incredible to see all these relationships that he's been forging for 30 years in Hawaii. And 30 years ago, these families were coming in, and he had a little booth on his kitchen area, and it was like a little bench. It wasn't designed for this, but it was like all the kids would want to sit up there and watch Uncle Roy cook. It was a really cool thing. He'd be cooking, he'd be doing his thing, and it's kind of like, you guys watch Gordon Ramsay? You guys watched, it's not an exaggeration, guys. That's what it is. You have a chef that's worth his weight. He's fiery, he's passionate, he's yelling, he's throwing dishes. That's what it is. If you have a chef, you heard that saying, don't trust a skinny chef? I agree, but I would also say don't trust this passionate chef, because once you lose that passion, then it shows in your cooking. Roy was just that. Roy was as passionate as it gets. He'd be breaking dishes, he'd be yelling at the guys. I can't even say what he was saying, but he was, it's his name on the door, it's his standard, right? So he was very passionate, but it was fun to see because he had these kids that would just always want to sit on Uncle Roy's table. It was a little ledge that they were sitting on, and he's cooking here. But these kids now are grown up with kids, and their kids are now sitting there. It's a really cool thing to see, but he's all about fostering relationships. And for him, the end goal isn't about money. It's about doing the right thing for the guests and making sure that their experience would want them to come back. And so you see that with a good example is how he takes care of kids. He understands that kids, right, we're not trying to be a high-end restaurant. It's not about, Alan Wong's is a good example of a high-end restaurant. How many of you guys have dined at Alan Wong's? I'd say a lot less, yeah. So the price point difference is great. Roy's is not cheap, but Alan Wong's is a step above. And it's a different niche. They both do a great job at what they do, but Alan Wong's has, for example, if you order a dessert, a frozen dessert ice cream, they're gonna bring you a frozen spoon. Little touches like that, it's all in the details, right? We're not trying to hit that market. We're trying to be more accessible. We're trying to be an upscale family restaurant catering to kids. That's really what Roy wants to do, is cater to kids. He wants to make kids feel welcome. So before you even sit down at the table, you guys are walking, say you bring in your family. Down the line, you guys have kids, and you're bringing your family. Immediately when you start walking in, before you even sit down, we're gonna start finding some appetizers for the kids to enjoy, because Roy wants the appetizers to hit the table as soon as the kids come down. And the thought process is he wants to enjoy, he wants the kids to enjoy. He knows that the mom and dad aren't gonna have a good time unless their kids are having a good time. So we try to be proactive about it, and we try to drop something as the kids are sitting down, which is a good concept, right? But that's one aspect of what we do throughout the entire night that caters to these kids. And it's really funny because I see all these kids that are coming in and they have birthday parties with us. It's like 5-year-olds' birthdays, 6-year-olds' birthday parties. Who has a birthday party as a 5-year-old at a Roy's? It's a weird thing. But when you ask the parents, they're like, it's the weirdest thing. They wanted to come to Roy's. And I attribute that to how we take care of them and we make them feel welcome, right? Because it's hard to run an operation at a successful restaurant with a certain clientele that's paying $75 a head, and you have a family of kids right next to you. If you don't handle that well, that could be potentially a negative situation. But if you handle it well and you make the kids feel welcome and they're interacting and you have crayons or toys in front of them and they have food in front of them, then they're gonna have a great time. And Roy understands that, and that's part of the reason why he is so successful. But it all goes back to this thing that I keep talking about of Roy being a good chef, but a better person, right? And so that's going to be the crux of the talk today. And that really won me over when I first saw this, because it wasn't about, like I said, who this person knew, how much they spent in the restaurant. It was about the most important guest to Roy, and he'll say this over and over again, we have people that come in the restaurant and spend, I'm not joking, like $1 million in the restaurant every year. And they bring their companies here and they spend this much money, right? And that's a valuable guest, because at the end of the day, it's a business and you need to make money so you can sustain your business and do the right thing. But you need to make money. So these guests are important, but the people that Roy really wants to take care of are the grandmas and grandpas who come in and they can't afford to eat with us every day, but they save up. And they save up for their anniversary or they save up for their birthday and they come and splurge with us on those days. Those are the kind of people that we want to hit. And those are the people that we're trying to take care of even more so, right? Because it's about them saving up and where do they want to come on their special occasion and splurge. They're coming to join us. We're going to make sure that we take care of them. And those are the guests that really, I call it like a chicken skin moment, right? It's like kind of like a feel-good moment. So that's what Roy always has kind of ingrained in us. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, but a necessary process of this. So we've experienced huge growth in the last 2.5 years, and one of the side effects is diluting process. We've always sustained this model of pulling from within and promoting from within, because we try to sustain a culture and we have a different way of working. Our system, which I'll get into in a second, our system is very different. I'm not saying it's better, I'm not saying it's worse, but it's very different from any other restaurant. So what it takes to protect the system is to bring people up from the bottom. I don't hire servers, I don't hire managers, I don't hire bartenders, I don't hire food runners. I hire entry-level people, and we work everyone through the same system. So everyone's on the same level, right? It would be a huge morale crusher if I made everyone come up to the bottom and then all of a sudden I hired somebody as a bartender, because that's not fair, right? We have to do the right thing. And it also helps us to establish standards. But anyway, rewinding. So I think I'm getting ahead of myself. He has all these systems in place, but what really kind of sets it apart for me, and I guess what I'm trying to talk about is well, I think I'm going to contradict myself a little bit. Let's back up. So the system that I just talked about, I think I should talk about this first. How many of you has anyone in this room come in to apply for a job at Roy's Beach House? Can I call on anyone to attest this? No? So I have this talk that I give everyone, and it's a discouraging talk. It is a discouraging talk. People come in and I almost discourage them from taking the job. And it's not because I don't want them here. It's not because I don't want applicants. I need applicants, right? But Roy's is, it's a tough cookie. It's hard to work there because the standards are so high and because I'm not hiring servers. You know, you can go to Haleiwa and get hired right off the bat as a bartender in some places. I will not do that because I need to, you know, protect the system that we're trying to hold. So I go through this spiel with people and it's like, kind of sounds like I'm telling you not to take the job, which is different, right? It's because in a traditional sit-down interview, you come in and you're applying for this position, and I have this position available, and it's kind of, you know, it's kind of like a yes or no situation. It's very different, the Roy's dynamic, because you're coming in, most people, no one applies as a busser, right? No one applies as a dishwasher. Everyone applies as a server or a bartender or a manager. But I don't have those positions readily available. They're available through time if you work your way up. But so they're applying for this and I have this. So it doesn't make sense for me to just say, yes, you're hired or no, you're not hired, right? Because it's really up to that individual at that time. I want to come in as a server. Okay, well, that's great, but I have this available right now. Are you willing to put in the time and the effort to prove yourself? So it's a really difficult hiring process because it turns off a lot of people. It precludes or it excludes a lot of people right off the bat because a lot of people at that point in their career say, hey, I'm not really interested in being a busser. But we talked about how Roy's is different. How many of you have worked in a restaurant? Not Roy's, just in a restaurant in general. Okay, and I think you guys will all attest to this. I think most of the restaurants, I'd say 99% of the restaurants out there will operate on a hierarchy system, right? So usually it goes busser, food runner or expo, server, bartender, manager. Usually that's the hierarchy. Roy's is very different. It operates on a slightly different hierarchy. So when you come in as an entry-level busser. It's not even a traditional busser. It's an entry-level. We call it a stalker position. And all that position does is polish dishes. And all you're doing in the back is you're taking all the clean silverware, glassware from the dishwasher, and you're polishing up to floor standards. And it's a valuable position, but no one wants to stock. It's not a glamorous job, right? You're just in the back polishing dishes. But it's necessary. And what I try to let them know is it's valuable because what you're doing as a stalker, don't think it in terms of I'm polishing dishes, because then that's a little depressing. But if you think of it in terms of the operation as a whole, it's a vital part because what they're doing is they're buying time from my servers, my bartenders, my managers, my bussers, my food runners. They're buying time for those guys to be servicing the guests. So they're not in the back occupied with polishing, right? I pay someone to do that. So that's the first entry-level position, and then we work up to a standard busser, and then we work up to a server. Runners, actually at Roy's, are higher than servers. Runners are the pinnacle of the hierarchy because in most of their settings, so whoever raised your hand, I think if you were a server, and chime in please if you've operated differently, but servers normally approach the table, you get the drink orders, right? Take the drink orders, drop the drinks, take the food order, punch in the food order. Normally, servers are responsible for their sections, and so as a server, you're responsible for coursing out. You fire the appetizer course, you punch in the entree course, or whatever, right? But that server is responsible for timing out that table, which makes sense. You're responsible for your section, you know what's going on with the table, you know if they gotta catch a flight, you know, you're privy to certain information that others aren't. But at the same time, if you think about it in terms of agendas, if I have 10 servers who are able to fire their own courses, I'm now catering to 10 separate individual agendas, right? And it could be, like if Steven's a server and I'm a server, I'm not gonna say, hey, Steven, I'm gonna fire my tables 1, 2, and 3, so you might wanna think about firing it. There's no communication in between servers because everyone's just focused on their own section. I'm pretty sure that's a standard. So potentially what you open your kitchen up to or you expose the kitchen to in that scenario would be a situation, probably not, but you expose them to a possibility of 10 servers firing tables at one time because there's no communication, right? And in that situation, I think we can all agree that Gordon Ramsay's situation happens where the chef gets mad and they start flinging plates, and it happens. But what I would argue more importantly, is the guest experience is going to suffer because now ticket times are going to take longer, the food coming out of the kitchen is going to be subpar, and the guest experience is lowered. On the flip side, so if you think about it in terms of a graph, that's going to be a high peak, right? You're going to have peaks where the kitchen's too busy to accommodate the influx of tables. And then you're going to also have valleys. And valleys you want to avoid because valleys represent times where the kitchen's not pushing out food, which is bad because you want to have stuff coming out of the kitchen at all times. It's an inefficient way to operate the restaurant. So we try to get away from peaks and valleys at Roy's, and we try to go to a more even, steady firing system. And it's not perfect by any means, but we always will have, at dinner time, we will always have 4 tables fired at one time. No more, no less, always 4. And that gives us a steady firing system so that there's a steady, constant output of food at all times. And we get rid of that peaks and the valleys, right? How do we get away from the peaks and the valleys? We take the power away from the servers to fire food, and we put that responsibility on one entity. And the food runners are actually the ones who fire every single table. So it's an incredible thing if you think about it, because the food runners have to run around and scour the restaurant and look at every single table and determine which tables to fire and which tables not. But we're getting away from individual agendas and we're going to one agenda, and that's the restaurant's agenda. A very different way of doing things, but it's how we've always operated. But that just goes to my point of, this system that I have to protect. Long time ago, probably 13 years ago now, the general managers in Hawaii Kai, her name was Diva. That's her name, Diva, and she's a diva. But she's a fiery little, this lady, but she runs a really tight ship, and I learned all these systems from her. So she got promoted to Waikiki, which is a bigger, better restaurant, right? And so she got the promotion, but what that meant was we had to fill the gap. We had to hire a general manager for Hawaii Kai. So there's this gentleman, his name is Zamir Malal. Zamir was the general manager for Hoku's, which is in the Kahala Resort, and at that time it was one of 2 5-star resorts in the state. So it was a big deal, right? So he comes in, on paper, he looks fantastic. And he's a great guy. I hang out with him all the time. He really is a good guy. So he's genuine, he cares about his staff, he knows people, he's run a 5-star resort operation. On paper, it looked perfect. The one thing that he didn't have was this upbringing to the Roy system. He didn't understand that these systems were in place for a reason. So he comes in, first week on the job, he's a smart guy, so he sits back and he's observing, he's watching. Second week comes around, and it's time for him to start making some changes, right? He wants to put his mark on Roy's Hawaii Kai. He wants to run the restaurant and make Roy proud. So he starts making changes, but what he didn't understand the runner system. He didn't understand our greeting system. And I don't want to bore you with the details, but there's a very specific way that we do things. So he comes in and he starts making changes. And the busters were like, wait, I'm not supposed to do that. I was told not to do that. And he took it as I'm being lazy, I don't want to do my job. So he starts cutting people and he starts firing people, saying, hey, well, if you don't want to get on board, get out. So obviously people are going to start listening to him, and they did, but without knowing it, he undermined a lot of the systems that we have in place. One of them was a runner system. So a lot of things got lost because he came in and wasn't privy to the system. So that's part of the reason why we bring people in from the bottom and bring them up. That's one reason. The other reason is to establish culture. Culture in any business, doesn't matter what type of business, culture in any business is huge. And if you were to ask me today versus next year what culture means to me, it's going to be a different answer. But I do know that having a strong culture, whatever that culture is key to any business. And that's one of the things that we're trying to establish at Roy's Beach House. And truth be told, we're not even close. It's an ongoing thing. But if you look at the established Roy's, Hawaii Kai, Waikiki, it's very evident. They have a very strong, positive, family-centric culture. And that's what we kind of strive to do here. One of the challenges of operating a business of that size and caliber and volume on the North Shore is it's really difficult. It's really difficult in terms of propagating and maintaining a culture. So if you, like for example, I think the last one we did was Waikiki. Waikiki 10 years ago or 12 years ago now was the last restaurant before our restaurant in Kahuku that was opened by Roy's Hawaii. And I look at what they did. They brought over the GM and 2 managers from another Roy's. They brought over a core group of 4 servers, 2 bartenders. Bottom line is they had a group of people to come in and start the culture based on, a pre-existing culture in another restaurant. We did not have the opportunity to do so here because it's a little bit more remote. So everyone living in town is not able to make that commute and is not willing to move out here. So kind of what happened was I got tasked with starting that culture by myself. There was no one else that came over from another Roy's that I could lean on and say, hey, look, this is how we used to do it. Let's build off that. It was purely myself for a little while. And it was, it's still a challenge. It's still getting to where it needs to go, but I think we're getting there slowly. The conflict that I'm going to get to right now, and I think I got to start toning it down a little bit, without ruffling any feathers. So I'm not gonna get too specific, but we talk about this mom and pop operation that you run, and I do think that there's huge value in running a restaurant that way because it allows you certain privileges or maybe opportunities that aren't there with the corporate structure, right? But for me, as somebody coming in, I got really enamored with the company because there were certain liberties that were able to be taken. A good example would be a situation that I was put in recently, and I would do the same thing again, but I got in trouble from corporate. So I have this, she was a dishwasher at the time, and she was 19, working for us, and had recently been thrown out of her house from her mom, so she didn't have a place to stay. She was living in her car, and I told her, hey, look, it's not appropriate for me to just have you crash at my place. I could help you find, let's write a list out, let's find options for you, right? Because obviously living in your car is not gonna be a long-term solution. So let's find a place for you. So we sat down, we mapped out everything, went through all her options, ended up finding a place for her. Didn't last too long. One night I wake up, it's pouring. It was a pouring night. I think it was like close to 1:30, and I get a call from this girl, and she's crying. Said that she just it wasn't an attack, but she was scared because somebody tried to break into her car while she was sleeping. So she's vulnerable. So I said, come over here. I have a couch for you to sleep on. I have a warm shower for you to take a shower. I'll get you some food, and we'll figure it out in the morning. I let her know that it's not a long-term thing. I can't have you staying over for a long time, but you're in danger. Let's get you off the street. Let's get you situated here for a couple of days, and then we'll figure something out. I would do the same thing in a heartbeat. Doesn't matter what the ramifications are, because that's why I signed up with this company, is to help people and do the right thing. Did I get in trouble? I got in trouble. I got in trouble big time. I get it, right? I get it. I'm a guy. It's an underage girl. Corporate didn't take too positively to it. I would do it again. Doesn't matter doesn't matter what the ramifications are, because it's the right thing to do. But it creates an internal conflict for me sometimes, dealing with this corporate structure now versus the mom and pop structure. But I think it's a necessary thing to point out that, once a corporation gets to a certain size, you need to standardize and you need to consolidate. And one of the processes that came out of this whole is that even a word, corporatizing? But one thing that came out of this is, becoming compliant with certain laws, with labor laws, with certain rules, with INS, with a lot of things that we weren't compliant with. Now having an HR department and having a consolidated corporate structure, it's necessary. It's not what I signed up for, but it's necessary. I'm gonna close off because I think we want to have a little question session. I'm gonna close off by just doing one last thing. We are celebrating our 30th year here of doing business in Hawaii, which is a huge milestone for Roy. It's an open invite, but just wanted to get the word out there. We're doing what Roy's doing is a really cool thing. He's trying to celebrate 30 years of business, and it's really a thank you to all the people in Hawaii for holding his empire up for that long. And so we did a kickoff thing in Hawaii Kai in February. Hawaii Kai is the flagship, the original. Did a kickoff in February, and he's kicking it to each of his restaurants. Every month we're doing something different at each location. Every restaurant is going to pick a charity, and we're going to benefit that charity. Ours is going to be on May 19th. We're sponsoring Turtle Bay Foundation. We're looking to also sponsor Kahuku Culinary, but we haven't heard back from them. But it's going to be a really cool family-centric event. We're going to have some local artists, live entertainment. 100% of the proceeds are going to go to support, these charities. But it kind of goes to the heart of what Roy does. He always wants to give back. So that's an open invite, just so you guys know that that's going on. And I guess we're just going to kick it out to questions.
Anybody have any questions they'd like to ask Brandon?
You ever wonder about or worry about always becoming too corporate, where you find yourself in a situation you're in before?
I think like with anything else, that change is always going to happen. And change is something that we're always fighting, no matter who. I can say that for sure. Everyone's going to fight change. But, if you are in a profession and doing something because you believe in it and you're doing the right thing because, of your passion or whatever that reason is, and you hold that value at your core, then there just needs to be a weighing process, right? I want to help people. I want to establish myself as a GM, but I want to help people progress in their careers or in their lives. And if I'm still able to do that, even in a corporate structure, then I will. I mean, it's a weighing process for me. I'd have to kind of take a look at that. And do I think that it can get too corporate? I think that there's certain aspects of the position that can. But I do think that there's still opportunity to help people and help the community grow, So probably not. Thanks. Anyone else? I'll go here, then I'll go to you next.
So you're saying that in 2.5 years, your guys' company just spread doubled. So I guess what led to that decision to all of a sudden?
That's a really good question. The question is, why in the last 2.5 years has there been such a growth spurt in the company? So I'm going to guess 4 years ago, there was this gentleman named Reiner Kumbrock, and basically he was the president of operations. So for 20 years, Reiner ran Roy's. Roy was a figurehead. He was involved, but not really. Roy was doing other things abroad. He was like an ambassador to Japan. He was doing other things, but Reiner's wife fell ill, so he left the company 4 years ago, and that forced Roy to jump back into his company. So that was a catalyst. Roy had to jump back in, so he started by systematically looking at each restaurant, looked at the numbers, looked at the output, looked at the guest experience, and that took him about 2 years. And then one day we're sitting in the office, and he looked at me, he's like, okay, well, now what? Like literally, he's like, okay, well, I'm bored, so now what? Let's open some restaurants. And that's what really led to the Roy jumping back into his company and leading us to, yeah. But good question. That's exactly what happened.
Would you say that the majority of your guests are tourists? Or
That varies per location. For us specifically at Turtle Bay, the rough numbers are going to be about 70% resort guests, 30% local. So we're very heavily dependent on the resort. If you go to Hawaii Kai, that's pretty much 100% locals. It really varies per restaurant. Yeah, I can say that I'm going to brag a little bit, but our restaurant, we've been open for 1 year and 9 months roughly. And within that year and 9 months, I think we've captured highest grossing restaurant. So there's a strong market out here. It's a very strong niche. Roy was very smart bringing a Roy's out here because there was a market to capture, there was a lot of existing capital that was just floating around, and he captured it. It's a very strong market out here.
Yeah, being associated with Turtle Bay out here, what operational differences, management differences does that bring versus a freestanding restaurant like downtown?
You know, Turtle Bay, because of that relationship that was started with Dana Hoke, has really been, it hasn't pushed its agenda on us. It's been a really nice, it's been a really good mutual working relationship where there is some give and take, but really their agenda has never been pushed on us. But I can say, so we opened up a different concept by Roy in Wailea on Maui. It's called Humble Market Kitchen, and they're in a Marriott. And they are just dictated everything. I mean, there's clearly an agenda, and it's clearly they're limited to what food vendors they can use, right? So they're very much a part of the day-to-day. But Turtle Bay has been a breath of fresh air. They don't really push. They ask for favors here and there, but it's nothing to do with the day-to-day like other operations. So not really a big difference, to be honest. But, you know, now that we have a new GM in place because Blackstone took over, we'll see. It's a changing dynamic right now. And I do need to apologize to Belu because I didn't make it easy for him. He was trying to do me justice by introducing me properly. I'm a simple guy. I didn't give him a lot of information, so thanks for giving me that awesome intro. I think he also wanted to mention that the keyword for the credit is Roy's, just in case you guys didn't pick that up. Thank you.